Rinpoche, venerable monks, and everybody else, a very warm welcome to this talk organised by the Cambridge University Buddhist Society. It is a true privilege to be able to listen to Khenpo Sudaje Rinpoche speaking this evening. He is one of the most eminent teachers of the Buddha Dharma in China and becoming increasingly known in the West as well. He had a thorough and deep training in Tibetan Buddhist theory and practices, so he had the traditional Tibetan Buddhist training for a monk. And since then, he's devoted himself for the last 30 years to making the Buddha Dharma accessible to as many people as possible in a form that enabled lay people as well as monks to have a really thorough Buddhist education. If you were watching the video earlier, Khenpo Rinpoche is the senior teacher at Larongga Five Sciences Buddhist Institute, Buddhist Academy, and he's using the internet and increasingly making contact in the West. He's visited many universities in the West in order to, I think, get us to engage with this extraordinary set of teachings. So he comes from a deeply traditional Tibetan Buddhist background, but he's very involved in integrating traditional Buddhist practices with the problems of the modern world. And he's also very interested and engaged in integrating what could be taken as a contemplative tradition with action out there in the world. He's founded a charity to support education, to support nursing care. He stresses the importance of compassion and looking after the poor, not just sitting on the cushion and practicing for ourselves. And in the case of Cambridge, yes, this is a place of great privilege, but it is also, as many of you here will know, a place where there is also a lot of suffering. Suffering that comes from modern lifestyle, suffering that just comes from being human beings. And what the Buddha Dharma has to offer all of us is some sort of way of finding healing for that suffering. So very much in the spirit of Khenpo Rinpoche's wish to help all of us find our own way, that he's going to give a talk tonight on the Buddha's path in practice, an end in itself or a means to a better world.
네 나탄가 추초거 드니 촉조 드니 레나 마르나 용다 데 마임바건 드니 길근 드니 롭조 참아담 냠더 더스타비 드니 스카챵샤지다 로종시지 고르고 숑알라 나랑오니 냐 탁바
Tonight, to have this opportunity to come here, to give a teaching, also have this opportunity to learn from you, from the members of the Cambridge Students Buddhist Society and teachers, everybody who has come here tonight. Khenpo wants to extend a very heartfelt thanks.
로깃니 요니 길근 데 랍트 총화 콩 넘바 몽보 쳐요레 달로 ngitsundi Thailand shone ya logit ke tani rapto chwa mambo dang nyamdo lojong shi ji dang tani rolan shi ji korku yabo shon yo shichib ge ta chunde yinna tani logit ke chu da shang ji ke chu tani wogi ke chu tar nambak sam ge nga sanjib chondon de ge chulik chaman di onre tayinna ta terang deni nginguni na nga so logic na tan chulgware tani terang logic ko ta terang chuchok ko chokso yang mambozudo tani logic na tan chulgwayin sare teni na ngechon nyamdam thanjur gurguni tani chama rolang shi gyondo yang chi chatam phobajire.
And looking around the audience, I'm particularly glad to see so many ordained members of the Theravada tradition in the audience. This year in Thailand, we had a conference and I had an excellent opportunity to engage in discussion and exchange with members of the Theravada, the southern tradition. In general, we speak of the southern tradition, the northern tradition, the Tibetan tradition. In any case, they're all part of the Buddha Dharma. And I'm really grateful to have this opportunity, and I hope that we can engage with each other in a very united way.
Tani ngala samsar kare jana ta tirap nishiba rzina tani jarkab ko parna yang chu tan chuglong mongo menchuk mongo yo tsi tirap zire tani ta ji chulug parn sam yinna ra man nangkar yang tatsu tajang momboyo saga tirabzire. Ta teni tirab nyerchik bani zong teni te zamzi mayo baga. Teni yarkab bar yinnan raga, chulug bar yinnan raga, kharshuk da nufshuk mug warna yang teni ta damchang tirabzayi da tsama pansan nyamda nrera chi tamzu yo tsi tirab muksir janziga songyo re.
So I guess to sort of start off with my thoughts about the 20th century, which is one that was characterized by a great deal of conflict, a great deal of struggles between different peoples, between different religious sects or religious traditions. It was in general a century of great violence. We've now arrived in the 21st century, and in some sense we can see that it has been a time where there has been an opportunity for greater communication and collaboration and cooperation in many fronts.
Ta ndi kapsina tani perna sharshuk nga chu mambo jiga tani nabshuk ta ngubo yarge ya chimbu songyoni tani chanrig lakhsar chanrig shisha ndazo tamchat flojong shi dana tani rangrang sosun choi nangda Peshchu Sheyang Shegonre, Karsan Terang, Sharsho Eshiyaga, Yarkab Mambojiga, Nashok Sanring de la Teni, Tene Yargi Pusum Soba, Rodan Rojimbare. Dedan Ravago, Natsu Nashukna Yuni, Teni, Shion by Nandrag, Loma in Nandrag, Sin Nayang, Natsu Sharshok Bana, Teni Sharshok, Tap Sanlu, Parmjur Sanlu, Teni Shion. yang samgi me chipa zo nani tawar de hagonre ndotsu yang chit de la songwe da lojong shi jizina chigde sharnam nyamjer yong jizda nis anna dang tangrap anna dang niga nyamjer yong ji dan de la ngetena guba chimbu ndupsam
어디 탐보지래.
харшук ма чага нөшук царик ширик лojongра тени нөшук ма тамчит шарк дари чулг дар ригни ана да танг тени харнап да надан нига пансан lojong dan relashini na gubandus.
So we can see that over the past century and in recent times, using scientific methods that were first developed in the West, people in Eastern countries have been able to improve their material standard of living in certainly in very discernible ways. At the same time, however, the West is also learning from the knowledge traditions, the very amazing knowledge traditions of the East. And so it's my sincere hope, in fact, that people from both parts of the world and can learn from the benefit of each other's traditions.
냠더 드니스 카차샤기 농동 소더 나와 상기비 출루 접서라 땐네 더가 마오와 다 라닉 그 제데블라나메 파르테르나레다 드니 지 신속 초더 드님 지득담비 마옴 달람 양덕바즈 쩐레즈기 단 디르던거 드니 참말라 냐지 도르 디바찬즈 지르기인.
So, in terms of the topic for tonight's teaching, I'm going to be addressing the practice of the Buddha's teachings and whether, in fact, they are a means to gain advancements in a personal practice, or whether they are a means for achieving benefit in the wider world.
Sure, 상기가 출력제로한데요. 땅 인군이나 루무즈가 tene jimjig ta lojong kala kansam she yong re te yindi ngi tatsar zgla kare jena ta na sanji ge chulig zgin de pe ya chewa da tang zapa tenja zre te yindi ku jimje de ji ta tsig jig da ni ge jirta jindam chun go na te hajang gawe ne sikero zre
Chizri?
다 측용용 그거 산지가 잡지가 죽음 제ben데 잠판 주치제단 랑거 대화 냠섬 용치제르고나 더 측용시즈 그거 배 갈래 가본두
So I've been engaged in the investigation and the study of Buddhism for a very long time, and in my opinion, when we look at the question of what the Buddha Dharma is and what the Buddhist tradition is, that it is in fact extremely vast, and it's quite difficult to put into a few words what its essence is.
옛날에 tene 추가 다돈도 냠슬랑디 tene 충가리 그나나 남지가 내금나 라니가 타라 양탁바 톱니 타라 양탁바 톱니 tene 고비야 양서 뇽버 지네 다 뇽모와다 등을 짱메피 tene 담 냥을린데 바제르고난 자가 데스타비 제베 톱기오도요 딱가로 몽우즈 그랑아 데스타고 니르고네레지 텐자양 손사요레
Of course, it is said that the purpose of practice in the Buddhist tradition is to obtain liberation, is to eradicate one's afflictions, and to pass beyond this existence and abide in the state of nirvana.
충가리 그감나 제베도 톱송디 제베도 톱냈더니 딱 베르나 다리 그 샘친 그돈 접기워 산기 그 꼬마토 쏘나야 다른 몸 터네 되니 샘친 그돈 접기워 운동조 옛날에 때려 쏘요래.
According to other ways of saying it, or to other voices of the tradition, after one has obtained Buddhahood, one should exert oneself to the benefit of other beings and dedicate oneself primarily to these tasks.
베나 데 자화추름 보치 제게도 복고 타거에 나페 냥어바 그바 쳔보즈레 다 콩이 나 길로 지게 다리 겠다나 지게 겠치 캬글로 와르다 다리가 지그니 디모고 라마 짝천즈레 콩고 송니 다 셰슌고 고름 그갑나 저송르잖아 산기 돕기원데야 대 무연 타르트바 마레제 산지 톱네 지실 건전 후 잔돈 잔로아 샘전 담제고 돈 줍기고 단 득조레 제야 베 사로 고네 송레.
In the words of Palchu Rinpoche, who was an extremely renowned master from the Tibetan tradition who lived in the 19th century, he said in reference to the objectives of Buddhahood that obtaining Buddhahood is not, he said very clearly, it's not to obtain Buddhahood as an objective or a means in itself, but rather to use one's Buddhahood for the benefit of other sentient beings.
girgangare yang songondo huerna ta chu zigide ngoma kasang dereng ge roa ge ma tamche ge nat ser shiji nat serze ge tene pena man ta bare zendo tang uni je nga chu chu nangdon ma shi ba da na chula chargi me ba ina ka yo mare tenda kemalin na ya ta na uni ge je chunde la jimjig shene da chunde nyamsil ne zendi matsu marana sosu semkamna pantu yachimbo yokuyore.
Tonight when I met earlier with Dr. Rachel, she likened the Buddha Dharma to an extremely healing medicine for many people in today's age. This is very, very much the case. Of course, to people who don't have an understanding of the contents of the teachings or don't have a great familiarity, then, well, it's difficult to say. But to people who commit themselves to understanding the teachings and to practicing the teachings, the benefit can be very, very great indeed.
다 랑아 지금 냠레 시사가 추 샘는 거 낫다 등을 세시 그 때다 추징매나 가성되는 거 신속도 촉직내 되나 배 응보 빠르용 야르기 되니 추르근 직전이나 안자 코리기 있나자 건거 타는 뒤로 가마다 잠들시니나 로미 로르기타나 되니 배 만자와 그 야르기 퍼섬 소바 쇼요기 뒤수 된자가 되요래 야 촉직내 되네나 ngasu roa maga tene nang semgi dingmer nang semgi nazik dele jang chabram phaba de hajan cheba dingmer chiraba tendabe ne sikero.
On the one hand, we can say that the current age that we live in is certainly unprecedented in terms of the degree of development of external material conditions. At the same time, it is also one where probably we are at a point of unprecedented suffering as well.
가리제나 가선대랑 다 당선 그 뒤촌데라 되니 코리거 되니 코리 막족스 기르네 다 가국이 양다바 매바다나 대비전도는 지금 코리 그 야금도 주나나야 다 멘추 망보 용에다 되네 뭐 탐칠라 된적 매바다 되니 나주 에시아라 소바가 양 야금 망보 제릭 자마다는 디촌양 다 지금 초르된 여보 매니 제릭양 자모라나 배 만자 망보 따르기 요지 니츠
And all kinds of incidents transpire around us, every day, all the time, whether it be stories of environmental destruction, of pollution, of wars between countries, or as in Asia, particularly in China these days, there's a great deal of worry and concern about food safety, for instance.
페름촌나 네 신이 아르거타와이나 다 로나니 따가 바르더 잔치기 용래 단디 잔치그 여름 초도 다 파르칠 뭐봄섬다 척지야르물 드니 다리 책쪽 자메트 송에다 셔차리오래.
If we take a look at the Syria conflict, for example, over the past 5 years, approximately 300 people have lost their lives. 300,000 people have lost their lives.
다들이 회남물동 시친 시와학 직zam즈 드네 다롱 잔치그 코리 그 초트나 등을 쌈기면 개밤 용신 요바다. 양다 시와 다 시친 직zam즈그 드네 첫 지게 yarmırdı 다 이렇게 매대는 사실 소소 캡처한 거고요. 야 초초 지게 초초 지게 yarmırdı 드네 그런 거 사차나 드네 교사르나 맨득사 이나 매디 다 랑거 yarkıb나 타나 김성내사야 매디 덴지 배 만제다리 교육내스 게려요.
And upwards of 1 million people who have been rendered displaced through this conflict too. So there are approximately 600,000 people within the country's borders who now don't have homes, and another 400,000 people who are refugees in bordering countries.
다 당래 상로 당딩군이 나총 주암 참마더 길득 찍바 상로 찍바 연거요래 예요래다 이나야 다 자르크 라라나다 띠르타베 멘칙 찹침보 쇼용디 되네 베나 유럽 그 자르크 안손네나 되네 자르크 모즈그 다 잡주란도 소땅린 체거요래 인지네나 간제 초랑수 시기래.
So even though, we are all human beings, we are the same in this respect, we're the same in our thoughts, etc. Certainly our circumstances are different depending on where we come from. In some countries there are wars, and then there are countries in Europe, for example, that are on the receiving end of the refugee situation. And as for the response in England to that, I'm sure you're all sure.
가스다리 nga 데 잡주로 안 가래 건 소화가 초다 냠지 렌용아 당 오늘 전에 코랑 하장 조보래 드네 다나 런거 도사가 니양메데 점상에만이 멋지가 된다 조르고나 나수 추고나 런걸이라 빼롱네 잔랑 노파 마시지제 베나 랑아 빼롱에 잔거 초라데 간데리 저런 거 또송래 드네 다 닝운이 나체 남발라 지 잡주로가 타가 레와 자지 왕차요 말이다 이나야 나수 다 로미 링가레라 테스타비 등은 정디 상록동 고사스 랩상고요.
And I would urge everybody to really think about what it's like, what the plight of people in a situation in the situation of being a refugee is like, having no safety, no home, having one's immediate existence at threat. Of course, I'm not in a position to make any requests of anybody, but I think this is something that we should definitely cast our minds to and try to empathize with.
디 샤완도 수타네 나 가수 랍도 총아이나 드네 스크 타네 장 왕차다 된자 요 말이다. 옛나양 셈 그다네 자모롱도네 서간당 깡이나 가수 상록던 거요.
So even though we might not have any particular power or capacity to do much, nevertheless, we certainly need to really think about this.
가레 상록도나 다 자와 랍도 총아 짜메차 너수 드네 곰바 작프 드네 다 르서 띠남스 드네 다 코론조 주반양르시 유직능 마토점은 신속고 초다더니 다 말의 용의 시한도 소줍교원도 추양다 말의 some 다된자 공권이야 요나타.
And in terms of being a monk, being an ordained person, whether or not these outside things are things that we should think about, maybe some people are of the view that the role or the proper role of an ordained person is to reside in their monastic institution, practicing the Dharma according to tradition, and in fact involving oneself or concerning oneself too much with things taking place on the outside world is not appropriate.
다티 다리 공도 집았다래 랍도 총아이 난자가 드니 추박 잠바가 켐바초이 난자가 나추 랭긴 요바치레제나 라니 긍요거 드니 조아 무추 시사가 드니 코리거 드니 뭐 탐체게 난자가 드니 리거 등어 셈거 등어 너수 세리 다다 좀바 쉬지도 네 되나 나추 뭐 참아가 드니 저드 메피 랭겐 But
in my opinion, actually, as an ordained person, and in fact, regardless of whether one is ordained or whether one is a lay person, as a Buddhist, it is really a fundamental responsibility for us to be very concerned about the situation of sentient beings in the environment around us.
신속원에 처리나 칼선대랑 드니 지금 네서 삽친 배 뭔가 요거 잔측 마임바 배나가서 샘는 거 단 나즈 르둥을 너초 있나 잠bol은 거다나 네 총사즈 그잖아 다 동체르거나 다 동체르거나 있나 드니 냠저 야속 초르텐 레칸 다 냠저 야속나 다른 초르텐 거 초바요라 다 코츠 거 제니나 드니 단 잠bol은 거뭐 탐치 소버 쉐키 거 드니 락차 위와 너 동체르거나 인세레 다티 루르가 감나 드니 단 잠bol은 거뭐 탐치 소식 그 드니 락차 안 땅오도 냥가 나트레 아니바도 동체르거나 진세 세요레
So the various challenges that we face in the world obviously are not restricted simply to conflicts. In terms of physical suffering and mental suffering, you know, one thing or maybe one small area or not so small would be that of depression. The WHO has claimed that over the last 5 years, that they have predicted that within the next 20 years, the second major cause of illness in the world will be depression, the first being a heart disease.
다 때랑 네 담보 동체르가 나때 디즈죠. 되니 콤바요나 양이 같이 잠바지요.
So tonight I'd like to say a few things about depression, and then if there's time permitting at the end, then maybe I'll talk about a few other things too.
가르제난데 인지롱바가 원도 시나야 다 파르치 뉴 야차니 시사직 텔라타리 동체르가 나요너르 젠도.
And the reason that I'd like to talk about depression is that I have heard that in England, 26% of the population suffer from depression.
당이 가선데랑데 인기력이 약금나 녀다 시친 다 찍다 하고서 여러와 단그 야채니 시자지가 주의 결혼데 파르칠 시친 찍다 그 시총 찍이야말 대인디 파르칠 다 뉴지가 나나다리 동서 그나트 찍이요차 양초그 송도다 대인디 대랑 아춘디 나나야 당상 사르기르 너소 된니나 오늘 동서 그난 몸몸 버처도 요사 몸보 요시체.
So England, a country with a population of more than 60 million people, if 26% of this population suffers from depression, then that means that approximately 16 million people are suffering from depression. So 1 in every 4 people.
회나 다니르통 주질로 그 야나가 데 종쇼 마마 차버 디르갑나 다니 카선데르 야나나양 다뭐 시친 그 대연초다 다 동치 또 니톰 주저글로레 파르치르 다 니톰 정하글로 달로네 동시르치 연초 뭐요시체 네 가마르디 니톰 주저레 다텐디 회나 야는 그 동치르 금무 동치르 요차가 뭐 대소 시키로나 단다나 이탈리에 때네 허난데 때네 다리 응소 인지를 yarko sum gumle yang garwazda karzadera yanangnayo yotsida jonshuk ikchacha kirka naxsaru sheoga.
And in terms of these statistics in China, it's also extremely serious. According to an official count from 2014, it was claimed that 90 million people in China suffer from depression. So, you know, that's the equivalent of a combination of Holland, maybe France and Australia combined together. That many people in China are suffering from depression. Holland, Austria, and England. Yes, all of these countries, their population combined, that many people.
체르드나 땅에 셔동거 내 동서즈기다 나가마니 요바지레 거기나 로지 땅선로다나 더니 다 차릭바 첨부 뉴든 더니 에이스탄 다 콩라소바 베나 아메리게 전전 로스포즈기는다 더니 지지르즈기는다 테르나바 양타렌도 요즈이다나 익차몽부노나 셰요레.
So depression is an illness that has existed in the past. It's said that many famous people, including Einstein, Newton, Roosevelt in the States, Churchill in England, all suffered from depression.
Tele mambo jigda yang tongchir gna ka shiwa yang shewa re khirna zomba bo chakchen tene jamcho dang gambo ger zomba bo tene hawi mendana devjin dana ngchu yalis to da khoncho inna ta hawi min ranga ranga tare bugu ge sanare tene yalis to in zina koram chonang am chonare tatte maim baga 그러나 시틀 인저즈나 양 그런 거 공화 뜨글려 되다가 더 흔으리 반고 인저즈나 양 동설가 나까는 그런 거랑 보고기야 다 시와 데라 속바가 그 동설가 나다 때네다는 랑수 저도야 치만 보여래.
It's also said that a great number of literary and artistic figures have suffered from depression, and many have even committed suicide as a result of their depression. These people including authors such as Hemingway, philosophers such as Aristotle, and even political figures such as Hitler.
실나 네 동설가 난그 파르체르다리 섬착직 장즈 라나 소소 다 랑소시죠 대시게요래 다 당상 잠불는 거 완도시나 로레진도 머철 야탄바 되네 동설가 날라테네 랑거랑 다리 랑소시게 요래.
It's said that a third of people who suffer from depression will take their lives, and indeed every year in the world today there are 10 million people who do commit suicide.
동설가 나트 치모즈긴레즈나 항아마 네 폴로이다 좀바 보적천 다 콩거 되니 냥은다 동설지비 때비지 그럽나 동설제제도 쉬 바로 그 직된 때라 모바짱 메바당 랑거 초아때라 이찬네 등거지 용서 저와 되니 띠떡버진다 랑거랑 소프르시스톰삼 다 랑든 직된 감나다나 돈덕 지양 마카 삼기 뜰따위가 묵슬 그 샘기 나타버jan지 연저래.
Freud, in his work Mourning and Melancholy, described depression as an illness where one loses one's desire for the outside world. One loses all interest, in fact, in the outside world. One loses one's hope in oneself. And in general becomes extremely despondent and afflicted by ennui.
야 뭔가를 그 회나 때랑 니마 마시려 남시 마요디 샘직 마르티노 nga 동ser 그 나야 그 삼고는 양 가르가 잠 와르다 그 다지 자미 비에 그 샘 마르티데 저런데 양 랑가 nga 동ser 그 나그 야그 삼나 양 가르가 지금 총 개회 총 남조 역 보면디 드네 양 지금 샘 마르티디 대소 동ser 삼인다나 삼스 요사레다 데 말에 다 티 동설근나 그 무어도 가르잖아 띠떡버 진다 다 그런 직된디 다 어떤 거 단나 드니 돈덕 마크스에 랑거랑아 예차바다 랑거랑아 보바메바 다 띠따비 샘즈이래.
Of course, some people might claim when they are feeling in general down for various reasons in life, maybe their business isn't going well or they're having some other kind of life problem, that they're feeling depressed. Well, this kind of, feeling of being depressed is not what we're referring to by depression. Clearly, depression is a more serious state where one's hope is extinguished, one feels very despondent, and one has very little confidence.
당 닝운이 낭운이 저 동설근 난데라 할레짓 할레바가双路 동구요 동구비 염선데요 땅아 스타버드 드니 야나컴마 다나 대장 아초 보여나이나 다 동설제기 타니데요 사로 요거 말에 당상 사르고 소요래 대마도 지 시집고 많잖나 뭐뭐보지 그 동설그 나궁우 등우증가요 말에 대전도 다키베양 치는 말에 디즈 지금 용시신을 연래 이나요 다 자노가 로총단을 개바 베 망보고 잡나더니 동설그 나빠잔다 베 망보요 건데 다 코줄 샘그 등을 다나 랑거 다리가 니처차가 셔디 결혼디 당아 베 샘농라 다리가 때니 능을 전부 좀 정도 되니나 다 로망보지기네단 니타다 그 샘커다나 런거 임직심용.
So depression is something that I've paid a lot of attention to and have done research into for many years now. The reason being that I've encountered so many people, particularly young people, but also older people in China, who are experiencing and have experienced great suffering in this regard. Depression as a word, a term, didn't exist in Tibetan. It's a new word that has been invented in recent times. The condition of depression obviously, therefore, wasn't something that was particularly widespread, but certainly in my experience in China, witnessing the great mental suffering of so many people and having contact with that, this is something that, I've really regard extremely serious, and for this reason have dedicated quite a lot of effort into coming to understand this illness.
다 나때 줄고니나 나때 주버시키 그 탑대 가레제나 셔던 거 내라 당상 샘컴을 방가래 그너 논식들의 샘 영을 방에다는 때는 논식 매바존나 초코저요래 야 당상 만방가래 그 샘들 롱기 또 금종화스래네 땡디 샘다 첩보 용조원도 점기 지다만 동야다는 된자경 다리 응곡탑ner이 된다세기요래.
In terms of treating this disease, there are different approaches. Psychologists may have different ways of attempting to treat the condition in terms of achieving states of mind. Doctors, at the same time, through their interventions, can attempt to control the symptoms of depression.
옛날에 다당상 회난 납쇼거만 가린 통디 때는 만대 챗송디 만대 만통디 양 다리 샘금 못돼 용래 다 옛날 만대라 다니 독쇼거 니바 베나 다리 샘 르나다 니 마탑게오단 런거 다리 알라팔라 속바가 리보라 오노파요나 대전도 단 참모 년 그마라 속바 년 그기요 데라 속바가 다니 독쇼거 니바 모즈고래 대니나 다 만통기대 양 탑치기 레레다나 데다리 탑 역쇼데 말에.
So while taking medicine may be one means of going about addressing depression, it's certainly not the best one. Clearly, when one stops taking meditation, the symptoms are still there. On the other hand, there are also all kinds of negative side effects associated with depression medication. So it's not the best means of treating depression that we have available to us.
다 역쇼데 당인군이나 출리라 따빠 요난자 맨난자 소지 상등군야 동인군야 더마인 바가 흥악도 이제다 잠판거 샤워줍죠 너추 문이 장네 그거 딱 가요로 그 나때라다리 판바요지다 나때야라 짝탑죠 그 되니 니 나다가 초와 그 냠용스르고난 자가 니 다리 럭링 것도 그 되게 체르남발라 ngochu 디바지.
Myself, as a Buddhist teacher, I have had experience in witnessing the great success of Buddhist methods in addressing depression. These including meditation, emptiness meditation, mindfulness meditation, the recitation of mantra, practice, helping altruistic engagement. I have had experience of all of these methods being extremely effective in treating depression.
다 도mer 네 상통고야인데 나가수 줄거나나 때 남만이 요인데 당상 롭자 몽보지가 상네 잠바니 저거 상통데 탑거 너지 디츠 통통스 그런 거 레세근데 그다나 임바샤나 베르나 디럽 야피르갑나 야치 침보 지발리 존지그갑나 척송원제나 근네 잠비 탁바이 샘기 란친 랍다나 샘기 란친 땀다나 직바 탐치 맹게르장 대와 말이 락도 톱제이다 딱 남마그니 베르나 샘도 람보치 따바즈레 되니 잠바 땡아 수다리 잠바도 tene takbar tabazere alambo chendo takbar tabjona kan rotum mare tiawada ngachu chambi go semdo sara ndere semdo sara korjiz inina toga da jiteng kam gon jigba da nat tamchit mare jinjo tene dewa da gawa chowa doso tamchit yang ramji mambat mambat jindo yam jongyo zeidana saru songyore.
So in recent times, there is a lot of discussion and a lot of enthusiasm for the meditation practice of mindfulness. This is something that has, though, always existed in the Buddhist tradition. In the great 8th century text, The Way of a Bodhisattva, there's a verse that says, "But if the elephant is firmly bound by the rope of mindfulness on every side, all fears will vanish and everything constructive will come into my hands." And so this verse is really likening the various afflictive thoughts of the mind to an elephant, and the mindfulness meditation method as the reins that bring this elephant under control. And when this is done, then positive mental experiences such as happiness, pleasure, etc., they are able to arise more readily.
Chamba nirjak gomdide sem lakteida. Tani sem jang momu binga tsechida nyambarja. Tir genda nandi ngamo yang tani nyambarja. Napti nyarandi yang nyambarja. Genda tsowi chodna sem de lodambang. Sem de chamba da shijengir gone. Rangi rangla yinrang daftagayda. Tate chig yar chan tombon rizina darong tela lamtongdana. Devjendana chig jiktenlin debim yamshak jagne moyoreda. Tezam mashina yang perna tertavi nganga. Dangsang loptra mombozina tene sanctum gumgyondu pe mandra karchimbozre.
So this kind of meditation where we focus single-pointedly and are able to abide in this state, and in general with the various things that arise in our life, to be able to deal with them in this way is in fact a very important kind of meditation.
Tani yang Shabab Javedana Tog of Sanctum Gumsar Chigore. The Chirizena Chamba Nyor Jaba Je Li Chamba Nyor Jaba, Tsura Chamba Nyor Jaba, Sim Chamba Nyor Jaba, Chu Chamba Nyor Jabazi, that Chamba Nyor Jaba Jurgo Gumre.
So mindfulness meditation is one very useful practice. Another meditation practice that has great relevance to depression is contemplative meditation. So where we can talk about the 4 applications of mindfulness, contemplating the body, the emotions, the mind, and phenomena.
Perna li chamba nyor jaba tene rangal linda, that should over pogba. Tene ha chag riba kang tela soba ramba vision of tagatironina tene shinong varsam ngoli taga storm kangdang kangna inara ngoma ingona changma tagba tir tabi ranjin rako mara ngasu mojang roda mojang khari tirona o tanda zuhazre ha nihazre makhazre pe zuba zukkiga tsira Tidang Java Changa, Natsu Ligum Toma Varsama, Tagatirona, Tani, Chu Maxang Ramjan Chanzaga, Mushinina, Tagayan Ligan Zambate Charger.
So by contemplating the contemplation on the body, our clinging and our grasping to our physical forms can be lessened as we step by step, piece by piece, analyze each part of our body, from our skin to our bones, our blood, our organs, etc. And we come to a realization of its impure nature. This actually helps us in lessening our grasping to it.
Tane Tsora Dungur was a that Tsora in Deva down Dungur, Tanhums, Yosum Yore. Retana, a Nirkupun Sora Deva Zam Yonaya, Namjiga Nirkamna, Tamchipu, Martawi Ramjanzer, Martawa and General. Jera Tamchi Dungurova, they, that Tsora Kandan Kan in Naran, Namjiga Nirkamna, Martawa, Dungur Ramjan Jamatu Zeman, Stakba, Deva, Jin Chapas, Yokumino, Tela, Young Coartietabre.
And in terms of meditating on our emotions, this enables us to realize their impermanent nature, that there is happiness and that there is sadness, that they are essentially always changing. Anything that is changing is suffering. And so this kind of contemplation enables us to lessen our grasping towards emotions.
Tene sim jamba nyor jabate danga su sim de la ji ndam mo na ton char na ton jam da yore re rigba ga to ge chrondi mawa marche wa dan de bang ga charwa ta ta te yang ka ji chawa ga ani yang da xia de chriona tene ka ji chawa te yang rangjin ji zba z mare den di ta ti sim te yang ani yang da to ge chrondi ti sim dan charwa tila ma te ni sim me ka ti sim zen de ki da drop tak z ma to menu te ni si yang da pa ti yong.
And by contemplating or practicing the application of mindfulness in respect of our minds, in general, our minds are full of discursive thoughts of all kinds of nature, but by focusing on the current moment and nothing else, not the past and the future, then we can come to an understanding about the nature of our mind and not cling to ideas of its essential permanence or inherent existence.
Tane chu nga sun jikten ga kamna shirur go ngu bo da nang ga ngu bo tane yodo jok tamche da ta ga cheryong ni na tane tomba ni yin ba da dag me ba yin ba de re.
And the contemplation regarding phenomena encourages us to develop a realization of the empty and selfless nature of phenomena.
Jamba ni yor jokban de 소지 그 추글 감나야 요래 내 다리 잠반이 저 지지기도 코랑수 단 작은데 왜 길근 소를 쩌동.
Of course, these 4 applications of mindfulness are in the southern tradition as well. I'm sure you know about them, yeah? Yeah.
작은데 왜?
Have you learned about the 4 applications of mindfulness? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Is the content the same as what Kempo has just explained?
It's a Chittanupassana and about mind, and Dhammanupassana is the worldly phenomena, and is Kayanupassana about body, and the other one Vedananupassana about feeling.
Yeah, Jipare.
야, 다 제남바 더니 당래 곰 거와. 대 문이 대 곰나 다른가 야나 랑아지 샘컴 그 나때소 요나 맨로아당 카르테 더가 요 카르테 맨나 마오 네컴나 샘데 나때소 응ong고 용래.
By engaging in this kind of meditation practice, it really does have the capacity to heal mental afflictions, heal mental illness, and for people who may not, in fact, have or feel themselves to be mentally afflicted or to suffer from a mental illness, by engaging in meditation is actually a very good preventative measure for future mental illness.
돈다가 니바다 드니 ngama 드니 오마가 감나 덕면 드는 조아 남조르 추던 강사가 예ver 남력 송도이 드니 조아 셈친도 쪼르유셨던 추 덕메 빠지바즈다 강사가 덕메 빠 지다나 덕메가 니 송원데 소 마수 가서되는 거다 낫 파르체와즈도 셈그 덕대라 하장 담부르든 바다 덕대 하장 더가 단 점바 첨보시 차버도 넙쇼고 뭐소이네나 되네지 랑데 지 냥톱 채워다나 랑데 담부른 점바 랑땀 작종 된자가 nd시 지 찹침분을 요래 단 내라 되네 저런 되네야 난라면라 쇼어 저런이나 소 띠르 님보 또 새로 시키데 덕메 남바님 곰교 nd까르 침보를.
And then the second Buddhist measure that can be very, very effective is selflessness. It was said by Chandrakirti that the Buddha taught two kinds of selflessness of the person and selflessness of the phenomena, so that beings may obtain liberation. In actual fact, a lot of mental illness that is suffered by people today is related to a very strong sense of self and a very strong sense of clinging and grasping to self. Maybe this is particularly strong among people in the West. In any case, meditation on selflessness, the two kinds of selflessness, is very important in this context.
돈덕 선바다 네데랑 키남발라 tani shngak khabar chanzu donjirla tani ti shngak tela tani nyemba tela tani uni tane ko momboji ko ta tongser ko na ta ngi uni na ta mangak zo tani tongser ko na sirke perna ngala nga shu mamba mare ta na nang semga ta ko mamba ze jona ngarang ko rangtu chamda ngarjer cham maim ba ga tani momboji ko ta tongser ko na te tani chak sangwi chani na tinda labjana ya teji topa zgdana teji droptak zgda mun samgyu ngarang la ichiyo.
And then the third measure that I would like to share with you tonight is a mantra that is very effective in addressing depression, one that I have had a great deal of personal success with, actually, in helping other people to overcome their depression. While I may not be a doctor of the body, I have, without any sense of pride or arrogance, have had great success in helping many people overcome depression through this method. So I would, in fact, refer to it as my main pith instruction.
당인군이 네 단디 상황도 ngang데라 총그 랑긴군이요 냠린 인롱우 바르트시니엔 체르제나가 chirgu yachi kyavgillo raptu shongni lo shimir kaptena tani sacha jambazaga chuchup shadan jodi tani ta lamgum khambur dazirze kizir gumba gnane khongrin jasonga khong yagarne ngare tani khong yagarne ondi ngala yige khandun tamba zujinson ti tamba da jamba chunge jig danir shege marada ti nang yige demak chigdu tarta warda taga nge taga rangar yindong ga chaptu zonje ta kirnambing garega chho matan suinan de yedme chena ya ta taga chho tanni nan de la jig sanlo rektan ya ta kan tarian de ngi nguni nguyo ni tsirzire de ni na ndi ge demand ta nga dam nyam de mlo ni shithamba nga kanga sonnaran lida mamjre taga dingi yindan changye sonlin.
And this mantra, this tantric mantra, was actually given to me in 1986. It's one that I have practiced for almost 30 years now. Back then, I was on my way to a teaching in a monastery, and on the way, I met with Khenpo Deza, who had actually returned from India, and he gave me this instruction manual or practice manual, and I have one page of it here, and I really feel that it has extraordinary efficacy, and I've experienced this and have continued its practice over almost 30 years.
Ta ngama ngarang ina sikap tambo me chirezena chi khasang loptar ngama ne janian tambo chi mamba ye samne tene girgin ye samne shika jamba ge yirkin la tene njirn roazin tene jima tan dinona mo sangi moyo wazi ji ondere ta sangi moyo ada rang sem ji ngero ada sem ji ding mo zo serze shayore ta tindi jima ngindi igen de tene dana tang uni ngarang ge samnayo shawa kangda kamrna ji yit tambo tene shawa tari ge ngoyor ngawo ngoyor ngayo den자즈 레척 뭐yen 대인이나 그 니런 거이나 다 저런 거 이처럼 치 마치용 강다량 니런 거 있는 더 지금 니바 침보다 신럽 침보서 저거요.
To begin with, I wouldn't describe myself as someone who was unmovable in my personality. I went through many phases of wanting to be a doctor, wanting to be a teacher, and etc. But really from the point in time that I began to do this practice and chant this mantra of the Akshobhya Buddha, the immovable one, I really discovered that my undertakings, my endeavors and my aspirations became solid, became stable, and I have great belief. I don't know whether or not, in fact, you do, you might or you might not, but I really feel that this mantra is one that has great power and also great power of blessing.
다데나 지마 디 흥각다나 이게 주베 온 말에 그 임접주 온도 때네 지 척직네 범그 야르마토나 때네 나랑 딱하니 뭐 몸보지가 지 몸보지가 던자세 맘뇨 옛날에 니 게르게 때네 지가 다 코랑 안바 나가 때제니나 다 춘디 범 흑직 야르마톤조 제 때네 뭐 몸보지도 때네 다리 적송 저런 강따리야나 노바요지 말했삼고 출리가 잠바츠이나 냠슬랑네나 허랑 아주 스만이나 만도 출리 답바 요메단 된자 말해 ngak은 이바데요 잔자데 델라지 출리가 잠바다나 답바 요메 그쳐버도 말해 델라 니바 쳐버jan소데 머시 냠슬랑나요 다리 총제 데나 그 남바 촐라 때랑에 무술 그 지킨 모즈가 그 따가 처럼이다 대랑인디 생각도 다리 쳐남바 말아 그 지금 돈지네 되네 제남바 곰크요나라랑 급지잖아 되네 지마 잠바가 수니즈르난 된다면 요네나 코란라 다리가 테스타반 동갑지나 냔제.
So this mantra, in fact, doesn't have many words. It has, in fact, only 10 syllables. It's not one that I've, taught or before lots and lots of people, but certainly on an individual basis over time I've really shared it with a lot of people, and they've really had enjoyed great success from it. I don't feel it's one that you necessarily have to have religious faith in order to derive efficacy from, in the same way that medicine can be beneficial to people regardless of whether they have a particular belief or not. I feel that this mantra has efficacy in and of itself. So if you have the need, feel free to write it down, and in the future if you encounter someone who would be in need of it or who would benefit from it, feel free to share it with them.
단데 옴잔자 마하로카나 홍팟 옴잔자 마하로카나 홍팟 옴잔자 마하로카나 홍팟 단데 다리 그러나 랑커 지거 납독다 된다지 말에 맞총 보그 사차나 다래가 드니 다 하정 괴바 진보 좀 펌거 공부 측송을 주잖아 단디 흥각도 란 지금 돈지스 있나 더건 잠보는 걸 하다 흘러다 노진라 소바 탐치 다리가 노바 탐치 저런 게 록송어래.
The efficacy of this mantra is not something that I'm making up myself. I should add here that I forgot to add before that Kempo would advise somebody who would like to recite this mantra to recite it 10 times or even upwards of to 100,000 of times for benefit. In any case, the great efficacy, potency of this mantra was described by the great Tibetan master Mipan Rinpoche, who described it as having the power to surmount all of the deities, nagas and spirits.
대전도 름느 탐sit 다리가 매버린 게 와다나 참매 비링알라 소바거 득바 탐sit 적버린 게 록송을.
The ability to even rectify or purify any of the 5 boundless actions that are undertaken.
네, 다지 지르기 왕작 그 맞수 르카 감접니나 출락되네 르카 접고 ndso tamchit yang tagbaran jibki dana devjin da da datang warchil la soba ga tani kangi kyang matsige dana tedak tamchit daga dandi ngag naptona chuligla tapa yonanja menanja tani rangla tertawi na yonanja menanja ngi nguni nanda hajang karchimbo garchagyo.
And in terms of the various activities and endeavors we engage in our everyday life, it gives us the ability to carry these out very effectively and smoothly, to overcome obstacles, to eradicate barriers. Regardless of whether we have religious faith or not, it's a mantra with great potency, whether we are afflicted with illness or whether we are not.
네 나추고 초바근디 대런 그 차트인데 조직 고직 잡직 소래 더 잡직 존이나 네 나추고 공바 나추고 다 런거 샘기 납주르시 지그 토모 마임비 망어 대다리 켈남바 대랑 단다나 레디오 그 너쇼고 마이난자가 샤르쇼고 마이난자가 마총 창마라 샘기 난메사도 배 공부래 대인이나 창마라 다리 펜비체트 되는 어묵스르거 더가 버와인.
So tonight, because tonight's teaching was organized by the Buddhist Society here at Cambridge University, I wanted to share with you this profound teaching, a pith instruction. Today, people without mental afflictions are extremely few, and so I would, and I decided that I would like to share with this great teaching with everybody, regardless of whether they're from the East or from the West or wherever. It really does have great power.
네, 어묵스르더 지고바지가 더가 돈다가니요. 돈다가 찍더 맞송 연등 그 소화가 쳤다. 맞세가 쳤다. 네처 강당 강쇼나. 대체 쇼나 자가 등을 쇼나 자 더가 단 소위 여름 그 쳤다. 네처 강라 특나. 아더니 점바 첨부 머직지다나. 당 아츠 맞세지긴데 지 대체 단 등을니가 라마리다. 아주 사차 mambo나 카회즈 거너래 라리 잡나 터지 시찌 잡나 드그레제 네 멋세지게도 답변나 람 통보즈가 야르 jar나 양 마라 터즈 바브란제 양 더가 탕즈가 하라 손디 양 라즈간 고르고나 아주 랑코리나 사차 소소소소 조고디 드니 람 잠자 모 조건도가 대당 자와가 멋센데 양나 지 니마치그 베르나 다리 다른 거 샘그 가마있나 ngacho dingor shuro derkiriyne shuro devayne yam sangung oner kamna chora jambayone ta tenjin jikten zire deina netser kanla tigna ya chama ga yaraji semgo stopshik kye dena daga net shawan de zo tamchida donlin shawan de zo tamchida danlin shijo zomba shijo na karchen bore.
The other thing that I would like to talk or to urge as extremely important in our lives, it's inevitable that we will confront all kinds of ups and downs. Moments of happiness, moments of unhappiness. We have a saying, an idiom in Tibetan, which says, after you go up a mountain, then you go down. After a moment of happiness, then there's sadness. This changeable nature is in fact the absolute reality of everyday lives, and it's very important that in the face of whatever we encounter, that we maintain a mind that is at ease.
Tani gindenga tari kondngi jijire ta chulga lojong shije jemjig shijinde ta tirim yersik bala metumrong wazre cherezena ta chuga tani dame kertawa innan jaga stemjer kertawa innan jaga ndsoga somlo tega ngachu gindenga choatela pamba ryachimbo tokoyore.
The other thing is, particularly in the 21st century, the study and the research into Buddhism is absolutely indispensable, whether it be the view of selflessness or whether it be dependent origination. All of these views, these doctrines, are of direct and absolute relevance to our everyday lives.
가상한다나 제조인데 간프를 롭친네 타르신는 걸 로마 다 지금 그런 거 때문에 야채제와하고 견지 그 헤르블레가 로존 치기요스 다 로존 신우 띠 르하다 때문에 오늘 전에 그 그런 몸 살게요스 가리 점점 가리잖아 당아서 가르쇼고 뭐 디르디르다 가모지가 내까나 때문에 낭 샘기 어네처다 쉬를 공부본도 졸라 딱신 된자스 더주산 배 얌선 기거제 오늘 전에 된다래 맞죠 쉬우부 원도시나 더 야가리 난자 보이리 난자 배 줘버래 레다 낭 샘기 야라 나트는 낭 샘데 야라 지 헤르 짤 바리오노 닝오네나 하르쇼데나 오네가 지 처음에 로정 시기지나 베나 제체제발라가 교인직인 진짜나 다로 된자 몸보지그나나 되니 그런 거 스타반데 말아 척도요 말아 아주 뭐는 바 롭자 침보 롬구 통거 되니 샤좀 전에나 그런 맛이 공간에 종이 직된 감수 시차러라 더 대단 잡아서 많이 바가 좀 되라 좀 되라 차치요 노도 아주 처음에 꼴고네
In particular, the way of the Bodhisattva, written in the 8th century, this is something that everybody, particularly students engaged in their doctoral research or whatever it may be, should really read, and it contains such an amazing wisdom. In actual fact, I encountered a student who had actually graduated, and they remarked to me about just how amazing, in fact, they found this wisdom, even in general, even though we can say that in terms of the outer level of development, places like Tibet, etc., are, really quite poor, but the intense wisdom of, this text and others like it is insurpassable and very much worth the study and attention of everyone.
다땡에 상제바가 출을라 직체때야라 또 고야나라 된자 장매 가르제나 맞춰 김선단 담바에나 상제 출을 받텔라야나 운이 짱네 거바도나 쳐래 고아 거바도나데 거바데 다 돈토라 송요다 되니 차다단요네나 되니 출바가 껴이래 데 그런 거 땅도 말로나 그런 거 껴이래 되나 나랑 주이나 운이 지 상제비 출이나 다 잠바 쓰고 그런 데라 거바도나 거바데 달린 책이요래 데 거바데 똥 쳐래 거바데 똥 거래 맞어 보규 나던 거 나나야나 빼 쪼바데 되니 로랑 탐치 거 나나 로종 탐치 거 나나 쪼바데 가르침 몰랐어래.
And in terms of, raising objections, engaging with the teachings critically, this is absolutely advisable. There is absolutely no problem whatsoever with objections being raised, and indeed they should. Within the Tibetan tradition, we regard debate and rational investigation as really being the crux of our study methodology.
돈더 타마더 ngachu chongmaga tene janla phamba go shawa drupjenda perna ji gele ga thak dan khori chongchup go shawa inna jaga tene napa tawn chapchurwa tan dchola ji tare gendang go tene phamba drupjuwo chabrd rana susunguni na tene ji phama gekho dchola kurta da shankyung shijo hajang kar chembore nga europe ka sachana yongde 네 genko mombo 그 다 그런 존나 부고 땅게 매대나 되네 그런 흐송레제 지거 남들 mombo 소르근데 된저이나 녜되나 가수 혈숙 수이나 파마다 길근라 전런제이다 되네 전 첨보 탐치 그나나 파마다 길근다 쓰거요래 되네 로총 수이네나 데라 정수 제때야 배 다리 좀바게 첨보 쉬거요래 된저스 그거니 되네 랑기 파마다나 다 genkon도 수시사서 그 전조와 미르다나 던조가 참말라 지 라니 거에 그거는 샤와가 판바줍지 원데 가르쳐야래.
And then the final thing that I would like to stress is the absolute importance of doing things that benefit others, whether that be other human beings or other animals, whether it be work towards protection of the environment or towards helping ill people or refugees, whatever it may be. One thing in particular is the importance of looking after elderly family members. The Eastern tradition talks about the great debt of gratitude that younger people have to teachers and to parents. This is extremely important. However, in coming to Europe, Kempo has heard of many instances where many old people have essentially died in situations where they haven't had the care or attention of their children. So looking after one's parents and fulfilling these responsibilities is clearly an important thing to do.
Thank
Thank you very much.